is a tall task to follow up a legend, maybe the best to ever do it, but yet Kalen DeBoer decided to do it and taking the job over at Alabama. But they have a ton of talent and national championship aspirations, even if it's far-fetched for a lot of people. It's not going to be far-fetched if you go down to T-Town and listen to what the people that say Roll Tide every Saturday have to say about this year's Alabama team. Thank you guys for tuning in. I am Colin Bashnagel, your host here at Bash's College Football Show. Please like the video if you like the video and subscribe for more college football content as we are doing all these previews. We're doing this series throughout the preseason, and we are in preseason mode right now where we're going to be talking about the 2025 season upcoming, and we're going to be predicting a bunch of teams. So comment down below what you think of this video. Any sort of comments about Alabama, how you think they're going to do, anything about a player I should know about, etc. And then also you could comment down below if you want to see another team get their preview a little bit quicker. Next up, we have the Miami Hurricanes, and then we're kind of looking for the Big 12 school, Big 10, SEC. I got a plan there. We're going to circle back, by the way. Boston College is going to be on deck for the ACC once we get through all the conferences. This is 4-4 of all the conferences. Enough with that ramble. We're going to get into what you clicked on this video for, the Alabama Crimson Tide. So we're going to start with talking about the 2024 season, which was a mixed bag for Alabama. A lot of inconsistency on the offensive side of the ball, and in particular at the quarterback position by Jalen Milroe. He's gone off to the NFL. And they're looking for weapons to surround whoever ends up winning the quarterback battle this year, because last year, of course, the weapons were good, but they weren't amazing. They couldn't really run the ball super effectively. They seem to have receivers kind of come and go throughout the year, especially some of the guys below Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard, the top two receivers returning from a year ago. And the defense was also very inconsistent. A lot of the older guys definitely let them down in some games, and they also showed up in other games. But you saw a good example of what Alabama was last year in the Georgia game that everybody remembers. I mean, Ryan Williams' touchdown catch was an intro clip to my video here in 2025. All my videos have that same intro clip. And you saw the classic finish to that, but the first half of just explosion and domination by Alabama showed what that team was capable of. In the second half of absolutely collapsing, allowing Georgia to come back in that game, almost losing that game, and ended up pulling it out at the end. That's something that Alabama fans don't want to get used to. The inconsistency on Saturdays. They could go out and whoop LSU in Death Valley and then turn around a couple weeks later and get absolutely smacked around physically by Oklahoma, where they couldn't score any points other than, they had the one situation there with Ryan Williams' touchdown that got taken away in that game. Ultimately, though, like, you see this offense in three of the losses not look great. Even if they put up 35 points against Vanderbilt, they were much more talented than that Vanderbilt defense. They matched up a whole lot better, and they still got outscored by Vanderbilt anyway. In the game that really, by the way, was the worst game by that Alabama defense. They end up missing the playoff by only one ranking despite all that. At 9-3, the impressive wins against LSU in particular and Georgia were almost enough to get Alabama to the college football playoff. It didn't happen. They got a bowl game where a lot of their guys bought in and ended up playing against Michigan, who didn't have as many guys end up playing. Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Colston Loveland, Will Johnson, all these guys not playing in that game, and yet the Michigan Wolverines still ended up controlling that game and winning that bowl game. You got to turn the page if you're an Alabama fan, recognizing that it went very poorly, but you also got to recognize what you have coming back, what you've brought in, and what this team is going to look like. And that's what we're here to do, is talk about this 2025 team. How are they going to be able to achieve higher heights, or maybe put on more of a consistent performance than what they did last year, when you saw the flashes of brilliance, but you also saw the absolute horrible, atrocious stuff that ended up losing games like Oklahoma and Vanderbilt and missing the playoff as a result. So when you talk about this team, you got to start by talking about the quarterback position. Who is going to start? Well, it is very clear to everybody that I've talked to around Alabama circles and read on message boards, Kalen Russell's got the most talent, and the coaches know that, but he's clearly not going to be ready to start in the SEC right away. He's going to need a year. And that gap year is going to be either Ty Simpson or Austin Mack. Now you're going to get opportunities to see Kalen Russell, and we'll talk about those opportunities a little bit later to see the kind of talent that he might have and the flashes that he could have. But I do not anticipate this being we got to go with Kalen Russell unless it's an absolute disaster at the quarterback position where they just got to put the most talented guy. And you don't hope for that. Ty Simpson right now is the clear front runner in the room. And Ryan Grubb had basically confirmed that. He said after spring ball, if we had a game now, Ty Simpson would be the starter. But Austin Mack's definitely been in the system. These guys competing back and forth all offseason long. It's definitely going to be an entertaining thing to see how this all plays out if Austin Mack can make a late push. But ultimately, I do expect for Ty Simpson to be the day one starter. Now, when you talk about their offensive line, they're going to have a pretty solid one. Parker Brailsford is a great center who is going to help out that quarterback a ton. And besides, it's not like either of these guys are young guys. One's a third-year player, Austin Mack. One's a fourth-year player, and Ty Simpson. They've been in college football a while. Both have been in Kalen DeBoer's system multiple years, even if Ryan Grubb is new. And only one of the quarterbacks, Austin Mack, has actually been on a team with Ryan Grubb. I would have said played for Ryan Grubb, but he didn't really play too much on the field, but a lot of development and practice through Ryan Grubb. When you have Parker Brailsford and Jaden Roberts, the experience on the offensive line, the left tackle, going to be a high draft pick, potentially the top tackle taken off the board, and Caden Proctor, you're pretty encouraged by that offensive line. You know, you got to see how Cam Dewberry is going to look there at left guard. He looks like he's a pretty solid player. He's got a lot of experience as well. You also got to see what that right tackle position is really going to look like. You can make do, though, with just an average right tackle with a right-handed quarterback. Everybody kind of knows that. And at the end of the day, you might have the best tackle in America sitting on the left side. You're also going to really use your receivers a lot, as in trying to find creative ways to get them the ball, because Ryan Williams is fantastic after the catch. Jeremy Bernard has always been that like slot-ish. I mean, he can line up in the slot. He could go play in the Z. He can get a jet sweep here and there. You can design certain ways to get Jeremy Bernard the football because he's electric with the football in his hands, and he's kind of got a little bit of running back skills when it comes to getting the ball in his hands. And Isaiah Horton, by the way, I think was an underrated get from this past offseason in the transfer portal. I feel like nationally, maybe around Alabama circles, they're going to talk about it, but nationally, I think a lot of people forget how impactful that could be. Isaiah Horton, to me, popped last year at Miami as a part of that really electric, exciting offense ran by Cam Ward. And they also got some younger guys like Jalen Mbakwe. Cole Adams is also somebody that Alabama fans are super hyped up about. And we'll see if one of these younger guys can kind of crack the rotation. But that generally, maybe Jalen Hale included in there. But those are the 5 really wide receivers that I'm going to watch for. They got a couple of tight ends as well that they're going to use. Josh Cuevas, who's going to be solid as far as being a tight end in the run game, as well as being a threat in play action pass. Then there's a little bit of competition. You got Brody Dalton, who you added from Troy, who I think is a pretty decent prospect. We'll see how it all plays out. Jay Lindsey, Danny Lewis Jr., those are kind of the tight ends that are going to be pushing for some playing time. And Josh Cuevas is really the one that you could say is probably going to be the guy there. Jam Miller, look, he beat out Justice Haynes for one way or another, whether that was Justice Haynes just being like, I need to go. This is, not the place for me. But either way, Jam Miller, you can be comfortable with him. He got a lot of snaps last year. Richard Young, a very talented player coming out of high school. And then you got a G5, more so of like a returner or big play threat in Draylon Washington from UL Lafayette, Louisiana. I think that they're going to be pretty set at running back. And with that offensive line, I think you could see more production. You could see 1,000 yards from Jam Miller this year. That wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. Now, when we look on the defensive side of the football, this is really where Alabama is supposed to be strong with all that they have coming back from a year ago. Caden Womack's got himself a lot of tools to use on that defensive side of the ball. LT Overton, a good edge rusher, a bigger defensive line, and more of a 3-4 or 3-3-5 type of system here. Tim Keenan is going to be really good. James Smith is also going to be good. It's like a hybrid 3-3-5, 4-2-5 kind of thing. You're going to have somebody standing up, and that's going to be Quay Rusal. He's going to be standing up off the edge, but he's still going to be rushing off the edge essentially. And then I'll be interested to see if an edge rusher, Keon Keeley, who kind of is a later bloomer, but a talented kid coming out of high school, I'm wondering if he's actually going to be able to push for a little bit of playing time here. Keon Keeley, really talented player there. And then the linebackers, you got to love them. That JUCO rule got Justin Jefferson another year of eligibility. Deontay Lawson decided to come back for another year. They picked up Nikai Hill-Green from Colorado in the portal, who's bounced around a little bit. He's got a lot of experience as well, and he's going to come in and play a decent amount. So you got to be excited about that front seven, and you can be excited about the secondary too. Keon Sapp, Bray Hubbard, a really, really talented, good duo in the back end. You have two really good corners that you're comfortable with in Damani Jackson and Zabian Brown, replacing that a slot, or what Alabama calls the husky position, with Malachi Moore. That'll be a little bit interesting. Deshaun Jones is the experienced guy you kind of can lean on. I'm curious to see if maybe I'm just throwing this out there, Alabama fans. I have not heard any smoke, but the talented true freshman Dijon Lee Jr., or they added Cam Calhoun from Utah. Maybe one of those guys can plug in at that spot if none of those guys are going to be good enough. So ultimately, that defense is just stacked. They're going to be incredible. They're going to be a tough out for everybody in college football. So let's talk about this schedule real quick. When you start out on the road at Florida State, this would be a little bit more hyped of a matchup if Florida State wasn't an absolute disaster last year, but you don't really know what Florida State's going to throw at you. They bring in Gus Malzahn from UCF to run the offense. He's going to be replacing Alex Atkins over there as kind of like a Hail Mary attempt for Mike Norvell, who went from a 13-0 season, ended up losing obviously in the bowl game, to an absolute disaster 2-10 year. They're going to be an interesting team to see. I think Gus Malzahn will be hyped and happy to go up against Alabama with his first game at Florida State. Yeah, I'm going to be very interested to see how that game goes. Louisiana Monroe, definitely probably going to tick down. They had a pretty good year last year, but certainly, number one, couldn't compete with Bama last year if they would have played. And number two, I do not expect them to be even as good as they were last year. Wisconsin, they're in a lot of trouble, and Alabama smacked them in Camp Randall last year. At Georgia is going to be very fun. We get this matchup for back-to-back years in the regular season, same time of year too. It's week 5 off the bye. That's going to be super fun, and both teams are off the bye there. A little bit of a revenge spot against Vanderbilt, a little bit of a sneaky spot here at Missouri. That'll be fun to talk about when we get to the predictions. Tennessee, third Saturday in October. Tennessee still yet to have won in Tuscaloosa since what? I think we're talking about 2007 was the last time Tennessee beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just shooting off the hip, going right out off my mind. At South Carolina too. I mean, that stretch, that 5-game stretch between the byes is pretty brutal. And at South Carolina, I don't know if they're going to be as good as they were a year ago, but they definitely have the tools. They have the returning quarterback, who a lot of people argue is either the best or second best quarterback remaining in the SEC from a year ago. And certainly that's going to be tough. And then the next game following the bye, which LSU, again, off the bye, has that other guy, Garrett Nussmeier, who's in that conversation. That's going to be another fun game. It's in Tuscaloosa, and you get a good draw there. Oklahoma, a little bit of a revenge spot, but a completely different offense that Alabama's going to be facing with Ben Arbuckle over there. at Oklahoma with John Mateer slinging that rock around. I'm very curious to see how Oklahoma looks. Eastern Illinois should not be a problem. And Auburn on the road is going to be a fun one for sure. I mean, I think that rivalry has a chance to be a little bit reunited this year, as in like it could be something that could be special later in the year. I'm not going to give it away too much with my Auburn prediction because obviously we still got to do Auburn later in the year, but that's kind of how I feel about this. So as we get into the schedule prediction, we talked about how good I think that Alabama defense is, how good their weapons and offensive line is, and it's all going to hinge on the quarterback. And I think you could just write down that they're going to beat UL Monroe and Eastern Illinois immediately, and you don't have to ask questions about it. I think everybody on planet Earth will agree with that, outside of maybe members of UL Monroe or Eastern Illinois, and even they probably know the reality of the situation there. Florida State on the road to start the year. It's going to be a little bit of an interesting matchup, but man, this type of gimmicky stuff with how athletic the Gus Malzahn type of offense, with how athletic this Alabama defense is, I really don't think it's going to be a problem. Now, it might not be the easiest easing into type of situation for Ty Simpson or Austin Mack, but I think that they're going to be able to win, and I don't think this game is going to be relatively close. I do think Wisconsin could give them a little bit of a game because I think their defense could give Alabama a little bit of fits, and that's where the first-year starter at quarterback can kind of start to show its hand, but they got better playmakers. The explosive play, I think, is going to really carry Alabama through on offense and on defense. I just don't think that they're going to allow Wisconsin to really do much. This should be an easy win. Off the bye against Georgia. Look, a lot of people are low on Georgia right now. They're still really talented. This is going to be a tough road trip. Kirby in Georgia is going to be motivated to get over this hump. I'm going to make the same mistake that I have made over and over and over and over and over again, and I'll probably be wrong yet again. But I'm picking Georgia to beat Alabama, a Kirby Smart Georgia team to beat Alabama outside of a national championship game. Doesn't happen, but it hasn't happened yet, but doesn't mean it can't. It's a tough road trip, and Georgia's going to be hyped up, probably play their best game is what I'm anticipating against Alabama in that one. So I'm going to take the Bulldogs to knock off Alabama in the SEC opener for both those teams. I think it is for Georgia, at least. I know it is for Bama, though, because we got the schedule right here. I do think they bounce back, though, and I think they beat Vanderbilt. They're going to have to gut it out, and I think they beat Vanderbilt. They go on the road and beat Missouri. As far as Vanderbilt goes, like they're really talented, really experienced, and I think that they're going to be a super tough out for anybody. I think Tuscaloosa is going to be very tough, and they're not going to overlook Vanderbilt. And that offense, they're going to be very well prepared, even if it's right after Georgia, for that offense that is a little bit tricky to defend. I think they're going to be ready just based on last year's game film and being able to prepare for that style of offense. And then Missouri, look, I don't know what to expect from Missouri this year. I think they have a lot of talent, but the SEC, I think, has really stepped up its game this year, and I could see Missouri kind of falling back towards the middle of the pack, maybe at the bottom of the pack here in the SEC this year, without giving away too much about what I think of Missouri in 2025. Tennessee, I am not high on Tennessee whatsoever this year. I don't think they have the weapons on the outside, and they got to prove me wrong. They lost so much experience on the offensive line. They're having to bring in a quarterback from the spring portal, so it's later as far as like he gets here after install, and he's going to battle for the job because I assume that they brought him in because Jake Merklinger was straight up just not good enough. So I think that Alabama is going to be able to give Joey Aguilar and that offense a lot of fits. And I still think Tennessee's defense will be pretty tough, but Alabama's offense should do enough to win this ball game. At South Carolina, very, very tricky spot, but I really don't see South Carolina's defense being able to keep Alabama at bay enough. And this could be the time of year when Alabama starts to figure out their offense. I think that this is probably the toughest matchup against the defense that South Carolina is going to go up against. It's going to be a heck of an environment. I expect for this game to be really, really tight and down to the wire like it was last year. But I think Alabama gets the job done yet again. So they still only have one loss going into the second bye before they play LSU. Absolutely owned them in Death Valley last year. You expect a little bit of improvement from LSU's defense, But this is also a defense that Garrett Nussmeier and that squad, they, again, are not going to be faced with this test until now of a defense that's going to be up to this caliber. I think that Alabama is going to get it done at home, and then you get a revenge spot against Oklahoma. Again, a very tough game, and I think it helps them and benefits them that they get this game at home, because if it was like last year with the road game following this, man, that would be tough. And I don't think Oklahoma is going to be able to do enough offensively to beat Alabama if Alabama's kind of on their stuff on the offensive side of the ball in this game. I'm going with a win here against Oklahoma. They're 10-1 going into the Auburn game. And in the Iron Bowl, you know that weird things happen all the time. And Auburn gets crazy out there in Jordan-Hare, all the Auburn faithful. And I really think, without trying to spoil what I think of the Auburn Tigers this year, I think Auburn is due for a major jump this year. They're going to be a very, very tough team. And ultimately, I think that this is a game that Auburn is able to secure, and it's going to leave a sour taste in Alabama fans' mouth at the end of the year as they lose to their arch rival, maybe potentially knocking them out of the SEC championship. Now, that's yet to be determined as far as their standings, but you got to keep in mind, Alabama fans, you probably click off of this video at this point, but if you're still with me, just hear me out. I'm an Ohio State guy. We saw it last year with Ohio State. They lost a classic game on the road at Oregon, and they lost to their arch rival in Auburn. And I truly think Auburn is probably going to be a better team than that Michigan team was last year. So just because I have Alabama having that same type of track, you can't lose all hope in a 12-team playoff. I think 10-2, 6-2 with the 2 losses being at Georgia and at Auburn, they would be safely, regardless if they're in the SEC championship and they end up losing, or if they're not in the SEC championship, they're in the playoff no matter what, in my estimation, unless everything around college football is crazy. If they get to 10-2 with those 2 losses and they have wins against LSU and Oklahoma and South Carolina and Vanderbilt and all those teams that could be considered quality wins by the end of the year, I think Alabama is going to be safe. And I do, despite the 10-2 record, think that Alabama has the talent and the ability to go and win a national championship. We will determine that when we predict the 12-team playoff, and we are still very far from that. But not all hope is lost. 10-2 now is the old 11-1 in the 4-team model. It is what it is, and I think Alabama, even with a 10-2 record, has very good chance to do something special this year. Thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate you. If you've made it this far, click that like button if you haven't already. I'll see you guys in the next video where we are doing the Miami Hurricanes. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you then.